Hi, and welcome to the Punk CX podcast. My name is Adrian Swinsko, and I'm an advisor, best-selling author, speaker, and general explorer when it comes to customer and employee experience. I'm really interested in figuring out what it takes to build organizations that produce better outcomes for both customers and employees. So with that in mind, I seek out and interview CEOs, entrepreneurs, business and tech leaders, authors and academics to uncover some clues about what it takes to build such an organization. Now, some of you may know the podcast as the Rare Business Podcast, but I decided to rename and rebrand the podcast recently. This is for a number of reasons. First one was to mirror the title of my book Punk CX, which was published in June 2019. 2, because I'm a fan of punk music. And 3, it's just more fun, right? If this is your first time listening to one of these interviews, then hello and welcome. Please do dive into the archives at adrianswinsko.com, as I've now completed over 300 of these interviews in the last few years. If this is not your first time listening, then welcome back and thank you. So welcome to the next edition of the Punk CX podcast. With me today, I have a gentleman by the name of Leon Gauman, who is the Director of Product and Strategy and also the founder at Elsewhen. Hey Leon, how are you doing?
Hi Adrian, how are you? Thanks for having me.
I'm very well. In fact, I'm splendid, Leon. I'm splendid. So, Leon, for the benefit of our listeners and also people that read the show highlights, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and also the work that you do?
Sure. I co-founded Elsewhen with 2 other engineers about 9 years ago now. Mm-hmm. Elsewhen is a digital product consultancy. We come from execution, moving forward into kind of strategy. Mm-hmm. And we help our customers to create, build, design, and think about a enterprise and B2B software at the level of consumer software. That's what we're really obsessed about.
Nice.
Being myself, I'm a engineer, self-taught engineer coming from a degree in arts. I started doing kind of computational art, and from that became an engineer and really fell in love. And I'm a kind of polyglot engineer and moved into product and help our customers to kind of deliver to the expectations of their customers.
Now, all of that makes sense now, because we talked about a whole bunch of stuff which is arranging sort of stuff. Sorry, I interrupt you, but like
no problem.
All the stuff that we talked about before, now you're telling me that you come from an arts background, but then a self-trained kind of like self-taught engineer. And I'm a bit like, that now makes complete sense.
Yes, yeah. I think I started doing kind of computer stuff because I wanted to do ideas that I was coming up with back mm-hmm. then in my art degree.
Right.
And just computer is probably the most powerful medium to do really crazy stuff.
Cool.
Yeah.
So the thing, because when we were setting this up, thanks go out to your colleague Katie that reached out to me and said, "Can I introduce you to Leon?" And I said, "Sure." And we had a conversation, which was cool because we just kind of got a chance to sort of shoot the breeze a little bit. And you came up with, we were talking about a whole range of things, and you had like some really strong opinions about a range of stuff. I mean, like me, and which is kind of cool. So it was a bit like having one of those, like tennis matches that you see Grand Slams where like people are playing like these long baseline rallies. It's like whack and then whack back and forward. But I actually thought that it'd be really useful to take some of those things and explore them, kind of one at a time. Because I just thought there'd be value in there for us to explore them, for not just for us, because we'll have fun anyway, rummaging around in this sort of stuff. But it might be useful for people kind of listening in, as a little some possibly left field ideas, but also left field perspectives on mainstream ideas, just to kind of as an interesting conversation. So, if that's cool with you. I thought I'd just take takes
as
up.
long as I'm Federer in that imaginary.
I am totally gonna be Nadal, and we're gonna be playing
No.
we're playing on clay. That's it.
Oh
That's
no.
all I need to say, right? At the French Open, I'm Nadal on clay. Bring it on. Enough said. Drops the mic, walks off. Podcast ended. So anyway, so let's kind of like start off with this this stuff. I mean, you kind of like you were saying. You said to me, like, kind of crumbs. How come so much enterprise customer experience is still? I mean, I'm assuming that you mean software is still wateringly terrible. And I was thinking about that, and I was going, that's a rather large statement. Please explain yourself. And also, going to why does it matter?
Well, I have the privilege of being in a lot of corporate environments, watching people use software, and we are kind of either brought in to take something that has no software built around it, so completely analog and digitalize it, or we're removing something that was there since the 90s or the noughties, you know. And when you look at enterprise software historically, it was built around processes,
right?
You know, so it's all about, here's a process, we can create a spaghetti around it and digitalize it. And when you look at some of the enterprise software out there even today, a lot of times it hasn't moved much, you know.
Right.
Enterprise is still a very kind of gold rush era playing field.
And so they're also
very much about kind of first movers, you know?
Yeah, and they're also kind of still, in large part, still designed kind of inside out, rather.
Yeah, the many times design around process.
Yeah.
And a lot of times there's enterprise and B2B software that very smartly found a niche that can be bridged.
Yeah.
And value that can be sold. But it's sometimes in such demand in terms of, you know, somebody wants that piece of software that actually they will punish themselves while using it just to have a piece of software in place. And a lot of enterprise and B2B solutions come from that culture. So when you come in and you see, and this is the why part, when you see somebody, you know, painstakingly using a horrible piece of kit, it's painful to watch, you know, when you know that it can be delivered at the level as you can see in consumer software. In consumer software, you just can't get away with stuff like that. You know, you very quickly get replaced.
Yeah. I mean, do you think that kind of because there's that consumerization of software kind of going on, but it's not really kind of, is it not really reaching into enterprises as fast as?
Well, consumerization is a really good word. So that's kind of the word that we use a lot: consumerization of enterprise, consumerization of B2B, and that rides on the wave of a new workforce as well. You know, workforce that was brought up on internet and mobile, whose expectation is, and the level of literacy requires a much better executed software.
Right.
So that's kind of that's a wave of change that is happening, and the reason that it takes longer is because the enterprise and B2B space has inheritedly slow replacement cycle.
Right.
You know, it's not. It's just not as fast-paced and ruthless and punishable as the consumer space.
And do you think that might be because, I mean, I'm currently in the middle of so my wife has taken on a new allotment, so we're currently in the kind of the process of bringing it back to life, as it were, because it was neglected for a little while. So there's a lot of she's the boss and I am the labor, and so that makes me think about the idea we've got to dig out a lot of weeds, and not just the green stuff that sits above the top, but also all the roots and everything else. Do you think that's a problem also that is facing kind of the enterprise software and the people that have installed bases in organizations, and that they have very deep weeds, very, very deep roots, sort of thing?
Yeah, if I build on your allotment metaphor, allotment is a wonderful thing. You get a square, and then your wife can boss you into whatever vision of that little plot she has.
Sure.
If you want what apples, it's going to be apples. If you want to have beans, it's going to be beans. But you are in control, complete control of that little square.
Right.
Very few corporates operate like that.
Right.
Most allotment that are corporates,
yes,
they have a central control. They have a level of politics. Also, I know there's some politics in the allotment space.
Yeah, no, that's true. Neighbors and all that.
Yeah, I used to live in my previous flat. My neighbor used to edit the allotment magazine.
Oh.
And she was a kind of a high rank player in the communal community, this all of the bureaucracies that goes around it. So I know that it's actually not as naive as I'm trying to paint it, but certainly it's not as complex as a corporate. And I think there's just so many things in play in the corporate space around the structure of these huge companies, the complexity of that, the unhealthy relationship between corporates, auditors that also supply consultancy services, large integrators, the revolving door that exists between all of these. There's a lot of concerns, a lot of decisions that are being made where the consumer, the customer, not even a consumer, the customer, internal customer, external customer, whoever is actually going to end up using it, is not the first priority in terms of making the decisions. Where in a consumer space, you get bamboozled in a second.
Yeah.
If you build a product that is not considering today, very few spaces are immune to that. Insurance is immune to that. Financial services is immune to that. There's a few places where, you can tell your customer to walk off, and
yes,
you will still have business. But all of these are shrinking at an incredible pace, and that same wave is rippling through the enterprise and B2B space. We're just a little bit earlier on, and there's just a little bit more clause in there in terms of kind of keeping things the way they are. But it's impossible. Like you can't stop the wave of software that is all washing everything.
Well, I think it's also kind of it also feeds into this idea. It's like if you're not helping your staff, your team, your employees, kind of giving them the right sort of tools and the right sort of support in order to deliver the right sort of experience that you want to deliver for your customers, then it almost feels like you're driving with the handbrake on.
Which a lot of corporates are.
Yeah.
And they're really desperately trying to release themselves. But yeah, definitely.
So the next thing that you said, which I think is linked to this, because you talked about the kind of this Oracle, SAP, Salesforce, and then you said something and talked about the power of the umbrella in the age of the Unix philosophy, and I was a bit like, what? And I think that must be the artist coming out and you kind of building this kind of like this picture. And I'm like, going, you have to paint that picture for me. And also, more importantly, are you bundling in Salesforce with Oracle and SAP?
First of all, I did make an effort to make claims that would, intrigue you. So it's back into my right hand volley.
Yeah.
So
we're still on clay here, though, Leon. Remember, we're still on clay.
I'll start from the other side, actually. Why is Salesforce bundled up in the same place as Oracle and SAP? And I have a lot of respect to Mark, the founder, and what he did in an incredible company. About the same with Larry Olson and all these guys, right? But I bundle it in the same space because Salesforce, if you read some of the writing coming from Mark when, about Salesforce and the vision and all that, it was really kind of like the antidote to the old software companies, but they themselves became one of those.
Right.
So they're a classic example, and Mark has been a true student of his mentor, Larry Olson. He built an umbrella as something that you can insert and then open, and it's very hard to get back.
Right.
So you come in, you take over a vein within the organization that you're attacking. In this case, is the sales process, and you put something in place that is very hard to take back out.
Yes.
Once it's there, and the premise that Salesforce rose on is irrelevant today in terms of cloud, moving to the cloud.
Yeah.
Moving to the cloud today is very different to moving to the cloud. What Salesforce was a young kicking company. Sure. The cloud has been democratized. The cloud is something that an engineer can launch by themselves, so in a very similar way, Salesforce has the same shape as a company and how it works and how it operates as the older companies like Oracle and kind of the first wave of software. Right. And also it is owning something that today is anybody can pick up, and and this is where the idea of coming in and opening up as an umbrella organization is different to the fundamental principles of computing, which is Unix, which is kind of creating software that is decoupled, right? Creating kind of making programs that do one thing and do that well, yeah, and create compositions of those. The kind of the approach that these really big guys take is the complete opposite of that. Is getting their clients stuck with the biggest umbrella they can, take over more and more responsibilities. I had a chat once at a party with a Salesforce guy, and you got to give Salesforce kudos for doing an incredible job in motivating the employees. This guy was just number one Salesforce advocate. Yeah. And I was telling him, dude, like for the rest of the software world, Salesforce is just a CRM. That's what you're supposed to be doing.
And sometimes not a very good one either.
Yeah, it has its place and its use cases, Yeah. But Salesforce is trying to become the interface and the implementation layer of the entire kind of enterprise problem space. So that's kind of why they're bundled together and why it's incompatible with kind of the Unix approach. And everything is moving towards more and more Unix-led approach, the way that AWS is structured and the Google Cloud is structured and the way that software is written and the way that really excellent companies, modern kind of enterprise companies are functioning. They're working around one domain and they open themselves up through APIs and allow an ecosystem of different software to coexist. That's kind of where I'm coming from.
And is that linked to therefore you should be seeing the rise of the things like the CPaaS platforms, because it's almost like it's like a pick and mix and plug and play sort of approach. As you think about where you want to get to, and then you can just kind of like build your own, as it were. It doesn't need to be software specific and therefore limited. It's almost a bit like you take a very much an open kind of pull down kind of what you need and and create kind of what you need kind of on demand, as it were.
100%. I think you need to be very ruthless at thinking, okay, what can I build? What should I buy? And being very clear about the trade-offs of introducing somebody into your organization and them taking over something. Cool. as a in terms of a responsibility, and you being able to replace them when you need them. Yeah. To be replaced. And there's a lot of software that is easier to write from scratch and own, and you can't build a truly future sustainable organization without owning some of your own software stack.
Mm-hmm.
It's just an intermediary stage.
Yeah.
And I think Salesforce is really trying to fight that trend in the same way that Oracle does within their space and etc. Oracle is just trying to climb on the cloud, like they're so behind, they're trying to move to the cloud, which is pretty funny.
Yeah.
On its own. But go and remove Oracle from an organization. It's impossible.
Yeah, it's hard. So that felt a little bit. There's some of the, like a lot of the kind of I feel like the scaffolding and the architecture that kind of goes with kind of like organizations, but then and a little bit's kind of that's very tech heavy which is sometimes we get into on the podcast, but not that frequently, because my primary focus is around how do we improve service and experience and kind of like engage with customers. And so those first two things were a little bit on the edge for me, but now we're coming back to the next thing, which I think is a bit more front and center for me, where you kind of said delight your customers or be a sitting duck. Now I'm thinking I think I know what you're going to say there, but I'd love to hear your perspective, but also particularly what you mean by delight, because I think that many people get carried away with that idea.
So let me first connect the previous point to this point. I think that you will, unless you make really conscious choices around who you partner with, what you build yourself, what sort of technology, and how that baseline looks like, how your medium looks like, you can't really think in a customer-centered way.
Right.
If you have a relationship with Salesforce and you don't want to, I'm just trying something, and you don't want to kill that contract, you're doing that on the back of your users who potentially, or your customers or your internal users who potentially could have a much better experience in terms of the UI that they use, in terms of how the problem is solved, in terms of thinking about the actual problem space and creatively solving it. Delighting your users, I think, is the kind of the holy grail of any type of problem solving. That includes another party. I think that there should be no reason why enterprise and B2B space should not aim at smiling, happy customers. Like look at Slack, for example. It's a great example where the notch that moved it beyond all of the other software that was out there that was doing a very similar solution was to delight their customers. I loved Slack when it came out. I was like, I recommend it to anybody I could even, anybody that I could meet, I would recommend them to move to Slack because it had all these touches that made me smile, that made me go, wow, this is, somebody invested time and effort into doing this really, really well. And I think consumers are smarter and smarter and smarter in terms of how they consume digital and software, and they are seeking these type of interactions.
Yeah, I think the reason why I was slightly kind of reserved or reticent about the term delight is that I see too many examples of people almost when they say we want to delight our customers, and then they get caught up in the idea of what are all the fancy bells and whistles and the surprising kind of things that they can do before they've actually addressed kind of like actually what is the fundamentals or the basics that we need to do for our kind of customers. It's almost like a bit like we're thinking about the roof on our house before we've actually kind of built the foundations in many ways. And actually sometimes the foundations, the basics, and being brilliant at them, that requires discipline and commitment and focus and all that sort of stuff, can be seen contextually as being delightful because it's unusual, if you know what I mean.
I do, but I think you can see through that very quickly. I think you're 100% right. I think it's a red herring if it's pursued in the way that you're describing it. I think that 100% you need to solve the problem, and you need to solve the problem in, at the highest degree, at the best possible way.
Yeah.
So I don't think software can be. I think software is a Bauhaus and not a, and not a, I don't know, a Art Deco or a kind of a more flourish type of architectural design.
Yeah.
It's functional and beautiful, and functional stands first before beautiful. But
yeah, I like that. I like that kind of the idea of like it's functional first and then beautiful. If you get it right, then the kind of there's beauty in function, but then also that you can build out from there as well.
Yeah, well, I think I used this metaphor before when we had a chat earlier about kind of the idea around the chair, right?
Yes.
And again, like kind of connecting it all together, Bauhaus, chairs, all that stuff. How the work was chairs. Yeah. Because it's like
it's a jumble sale, ladies and gentlemen. It's a jumble sale.
Yeah, you can make a chair with a plank and 4 pegs, and that's that's going to solve the problem. But moving away from that to a delightful, still functional, comfortable, beautiful chair, that solution will always beat the 4 pegs and a plank.
Yeah.
So a lot of enterprise software, a lot of B2B software is in the plank and 4 pegs stage, and it's inevitable. Even of all of these structures in place, trying to prevent it to change, it will change, because in the end of the day, that level of design is what captures the customer's mind, the customer's heart, and that's how you win.
No, I think that's kind of fair. And then the final thing that you said, Leon, which I think is just going to take it to a different level of abstraction, given that we've talked about kind of like allotments and weeds and chairs and the Bauhaus and things. The next thing, the final thing you could have said to me, which I was like, crumbs. She said, Mr. Potato Head and experience as a change in consciousness. And I'm like going, I hope you've not got bad things to say about Mr. Potato Head, because we love Mr. Potato Head. But I want you to decipher kind of that and kind of make that connection, because I know that's just like, it's just curious.
So I love Mr. Potato Head. So I just wanna reassure you at that.
Thanks. So no trolls for Mr. Potato Head needed.
No, absolutely not. So Mr. Potato Head is a great metaphor to the brain,
right,
and our consciousness, right? So the brain is just an organ that is constantly adapting to outside stimuli, right? So whatever you're going to stick in it, it's going to adapt to. And one of the things that we're really missing, and hugely, in an area where people are continuously sitting in front of a problem space, in front of a piece of interface, in front of a kind of a workflow, is kind of a B2B enterprise, and in there, you have a person's attention for a very long time, and you're currently not synergetic with how you could be with the brain, with the consciousness, how people work. So I think tooling is going to be moving into a place where you are much more synergetic with the brain and with people's consciousness, from kind of using kind of baseline process-based tools, the place where you really can augment somebody's thinking and really augment how somebody behaves and really change the way they think, to help them to achieve so much more. Right. And a great example of kind of really to kind of bring home the potato head analogy. There is some research that was conducted by a team in one of the universities. I can't really remember which one, but they had a belt that their subject would wear, that would have a tactile information pass through. And essentially, it's a little piece of kit that you wear as a belt, and it taps on you.
Right.
And it would tap on you every time you would face north.
Right.
So this kind of stream of information, additional stream of information coming in. And a couple of things happened after a week or two of wearing this. One, subjects stopped feeling the tap.
Yeah.
Two, they knew completely kind of without thinking where north was. So they essentially became like little homing pigeons.
It's like Pavlovian experiment.
I don't think that Pavlovian is the right example, because I think it's kind of like predict kind of a stimuli analysis.
Oh, okay.
Where I think the idea is that it's an additional strain of information that is given to the brain that it just adjusts to.
Okay.
So basically,
so like tuning your consciousness, but around something. But then I suppose you're not tapping forever. You kind of like, you just do it for a period of time until that change is made. Is that right?
It is tapping, but the brain adjusts to it. So it goes, okay, I don't need to feel this tap anymore and project to you that, through the skin, but I'm still assimilating this information, right? So in the same way, the idea here is like, why Mr. Potato Head? Because Mr. Potato Head, it's a piece where you can put the ears, you can put the eyes, and that sound and vision just happens to be two sources of information that the brain has accessed and adapted to. You don't think about looking at things. You don't think about processing sound information. It just happens, right? Mm-hmm. So in the same way, it assimilated something else. So these people could just find their way around because they had this unconscious understanding of where north was. And then interestingly, when they removed those from the subjects, they went through kind of a regression state where they felt vertigo and had issues with their kind of their self.
Excuse me.
Yeah, that's fine. They're kind of the feeling of themselves, because they had essentially a sense removed from them.
Yeah, I mean that makes me think about. I mean, I think that's fascinating, and it makes me think about there's surely there's a bit of there's not an ethical dimension to that around kind of thinking about, is that what's the right way to go, because that feels like it's like that's almost like an experience of now, but also and more increasingly in the future around kind of like wearables and immersive kind of like multi kind of like sensory sort of experiences and stuff. But there's a huge ethical dimension to that too, right? Which I think that's one of the big things, whether you kind of you add in, because when you add in behavioral science and behavioral design and the use of kind of like data and predictive models and things, I think that's one of the biggest kind of challenges that many organizations are going to have to face around this kind of future vanguard, as it were, is that kind of almost, what do we want to do and why? Kind of what's our ethical kind of guide rails, as it were? Because otherwise you can get kind of caught up in the, we can do that, let's do that.
Yeah, 100%. I think there's going to be a lot of ethical questions in the near future that will need to be answered. 100%.
Awesome. Leon, this has been fun and kind of like and kind of interesting, and it's added a completely different sort of sets of dimensions onto some of the conversations I normally have, like everything from umbrellas to Miss Potato Head to Federer and Nadal slugging it out in Paris. But I also know, and I'm pretty sure you would appreciate that, when people think about kind of changing, sometimes the first step or the first couple of steps are the most important one, because then often people want things boiled down and go, well, if you're going to do this first. So if I was to ask you, for somebody because you're right in the thick of it, working with some really big brands, helping them deliver kind of like, new products, new services, and that ultimately is about delivering a better experience to their customers. I mean, what would your best advice be to somebody if they wanted to improve the service or the experience that they deliver to their customers? I mean, where would you ask them to start first? What would you ask them to do first?
I think one of the most important things is to come to terms that you need to pay that dividend of reprioritizing and saying, I'm going to be putting my customers first.
Yeah.
And if that's going to cost pain in the organization, we're going to take that pain. And if that's going to cost me more money, we're going to take more, that additional cost. And if that puts some other things at risk, we're going to put some other things at risk. We're going to do that consciously because we know we've been kicking the can down the road for so long.
Sure.
We have to deal with this. And, in very boring way, COVID is kind of a center of the conversation. And I actually try to not get into that, but is a very sharp, eye-opening event, I think, for a lot of folks who've been kicking the can down the road.
Yeah.
This existential event going like, my customers can't access my services. My services are falling over when they've been accessed digitally.
Sure.
All of these things that we knew that are coming, that are here, that are expected, and we've been avoiding, are now are at the surface. So, instead of waiting for another event or trying to zigzag or trying to cover up, we need to start paying that dividend of, I don't know if dividend is the right word, because it's not actually a dividend. It's paying that price of putting your customer, be that internal, be that external, on the front line. I think that's the most important step. Once you do that, you can make the right decisions.
Yeah, I think so. It's almost a bit like there are some people that have been, if they're really honest, they've been paying lip service to this.
Big time.
And actually, what this has kind of shown is that this, the coronavirus, COVID-19 kind of crisis has kind of like shone a big light on that, and people, people just I've got to make some big changes, otherwise they'll probably get washed to the side of the road. So, absolutely. Thank you for that. That's kind of very, it's very kind of cool, and it lays down the kind of challenge, because there are too many people that are paying lip service to the idea of delivering kind of better service to better experience to their clients, whether that is B2C or that's B2B or even internally, as it were. And so this is about, pull your socks up, ladies and gentlemen. There is, the time is very much now, and if you don't make the change, you will get left behind. But Leon, is there anything? I mean, anything that you'd like to add that we've missed out on before I can like switch gears a little bit and ask you to look forward, kind of somewhat?
No, I think I'm good to go. Let's do some forward looking.
So, the thing I like to do, just kind of like towards the end of these, is to kind of ask people, like to get their view on, what does service and experience look like from your perspective? I mean, what do you think some of the big kind of challenges kind of coming up, and what are the kind of the hurdles that we're going to be getting ready for? Just to get your perspective, and that'd be really interesting.
I think one of the challenges is data.
Right.
I think that we are going to be moving from a place where data is considered an unexplored asset to a place where data is a kind of like something we're drowning in as organizations. I think that the amount of data that needs to be stored, processed, and made sense of is just going to be overwhelming. And the problem is that data is where lies the future of services.
Right.
The ability to meaningfully introspect and meaningfully connect, export, import, dissect and answer the needs of your customers, sometimes predicting them ahead is really where a lot of this change that is kind of on the cognitive level, on the Mr. Potato Head level, is lying. Being able to provide the right information at the right time, at the right set of tools, augmenting somebody's engagement with technology, and not just having it a pull-push relationship.
Right.
This is, I think, where a big the next big step, and some of it is AI, some of it is ML, some of it is this, some of it is that, but basically I think that's for me the future of service. And again, we're starting to get drowned in data.
Yes.
A lot of organizations have more and more data producing artifacts, which they're barely managing to store in time. I'm not even talking about and storing is a big problem. Some of this is sensitive, some of this is important.
Well,
so a lot of the problems started to move into that space of managing the risk.
I mean, sometimes it just occurred to me, I wonder kind of where you talk about data, and I've heard data be referred to as being the new oil. And that's quite, given that we're recording this on the 21st of April and West Texas Intermediate went negative on the markets yesterday because there was like a complete oversupply glut of oil. And you talked about people drowning in data and things. And I'm just wondering about...
I think that's a great, a metaphor. I don't know if to bring it up or not because it's so timely.
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
Oil event is exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
In data.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because I think the thing is, if we don't, I feel like, in many ways, start with the end in mind and understand kind of what, in an oil term, what energy needs that we have, but in data terms, what data needs we have in order to deliver the things that we want to kind of deliver, then we end up going to just be awash with data, and we end up with this almost this thing where there's the psychological phenomenon called the paradox of choice. But we end up with so much data that we end up kind of almost like not really knowing what to do, because it becomes like a paralyzing phenomena.
Yes, 100%. I think that companies are going to be drowned in data. And if you look at some of the statistics around, the amount of data that is being produced on a yearly basis, it's staggering.
Yeah,
it's absolutely staggering, and it's growing exponentially.
Yeah.
But this is where the power is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's another interesting dimension, which a guy that I interviewed, which will be out before this one kind of goes live. It's a guy called Jerry McGovern, and he's a digital guy, and he just written a new book, which is a really interesting kind of take on the whole digital and technology and all the devices that support that, including kind of like data and storage and stuff. And he's just written a book called Worldwide Waste, where he's looking at the whole digital domain from a sustainability angle. And the idea of right now 90% of all of the world's data isn't really kind of actively used, but it needs to be stored, and that requires equipment, and it also requires power. And that's just not taken into account in terms of people's sustainability calculations, which is, I think, it's a fascinating angle. And so he's an advocate think about what you want, think about why, and then minimize, and minimize your footprint kind of on the back of that. So I think that's I think a really interesting and probably an emergent sort of dimension to all of this as well.
Yeah, I think that's a huge problem that I think a lot of people are aware of at the right places, but certainly not in the public domain.
No, absolutely. Brilliant. So one final thing, Leon, which we talked about before. So I just published this new book, relatively new, published it last year, in the summer of last year, called Punk CX. And I explained to you about this, but I've been at the end of these interviews, I've been doing this kind of a word and brand association kind of game where I ask people a couple of questions. And the first one I say, so if I was to ask you one word that you would use to describe a more of a punk approach to experience, what would it be?
So I kind of take in from that really the punk ethos.
Yeah.
Kind of being able to pick up the guitar and play a song, like being able to kind of democratization of means.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that this is where the future lies. I think in terms of in terms of your allotment example, in organizations, more people need to have the power to be able to tend to their own allotment and pick up and take the kind of the punk ethos to start experimenting and doing things.
Yeah.
And it's still incredibly hard to do in actually a meaningful way in an organization that is not PR or theaters, kind of innovation theater type of activity. And I think kind of to me, punk CX speaks to that of ownership and change that lies within from people picking up tools and trying to solve problems.
Awesome. I think I'm going to put allotments as my one word, just because allotments and punks. I mean, I'm pretty sure it's like I don't know if it's a really good marriage, but I just really like the example. But if I was to then ask you what company or brand do you think epitomizes that sort of a punk approach or a punk ethos to how it goes about its business, the experiences it creates, etc., etc.
It's a really hard one. I'm really bad at pulling stuff like that on the spot. I would say maybe Fiverr. Do you know Fiverr.com?
FIVRR, is it?
Yeah. Fiverr.com. You could get anything done for Fiverr. I think that was initial idea, and today it's a huge community of people that are serving from their little allotments. A huge amount of needs, and it's kind of a community that is built around people that have skills and them selling those skills directly to other people that have problems. Awesome. And I think this is very kind of self-serving, very independent, very outside the control of larger corporations and larger structures.
Sure.
And I think it's to my mind at the moment, I think of it.
That's cool. I mean, I've used it
to the punk ethos.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, it's not one that's been mentioned before, and I've used them or platforms like them, and I think it's spot on. It fits with that sort of democratization and sort of idea. So that's cool because that just extends the portfolio into different kind of like areas that I'm collecting together. But Leon, thank you for that. That's all been super interesting and mind-bending and artful and Mr. Potato Head all kind of rolled into one. And I'm wondering whether or not I think we're going to have to make sure to say that the Nadal and Federer kind of match that rain will stop playing. We'll need to resume at another time. But thank you so much for your time and experience today. That's sharing your time and your experience with us today. That's been awesome. But one final thing, if people want to find out more about the work that you can do, where should we go? Elsewhen.com?
Elsewhen.com. Yes, indeed. We have we do a lot of writing around different subjects. Also follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter.
Fantastic. I'll make sure I get all that linked up afterwards. But Leon, once again, thank you so much for your time today. That's been awesome.
Thank you, Adrian. I really enjoyed it. Really nice to have the freedom to just explore some crazy subjects. It was really fun.
Cool. Well, that was cool. I hope you enjoyed it. I did, and I always do actually, because I always learn something new when I speak to some of these amazing kind of people, and it's always something new that I can incorporate into my writing, speaking, workshops and other sort of advisory work that I do. Now, if you're interested in learning about any of that sort of stuff, then you can find out more about how I work with clients over at adrianswinscoe.com. One final thing before I go, please consider heading over to iTunes or Spotify or whichever podcast platform you choose to use, and do leave a review. Every little helps, as they say. Anyway, that's all for now. Thank you for listening, and do tune in again soon. All the very best. Cheers. Bye.